The stagecoach deposited Zelda Lancaster back at the dusty depot in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, on a scorching afternoon in July 1884, her trunk beside her and her pride in tatters. She stood on the wooden platform, 23 years old and thoroughly humiliated, watching the vehicle that had carried her away from her intended husband disappear into the shimmering heat. 3 days. That was all the time it had taken for Frederick Carlyle to decide she was unsuitable, too learned, too opinionated, too everything he did not want in a wife. He had paid for her return passage and sent her back like a piece of defective merchandise, his final words still ringing in her ears about how a woman with that much education would never be obedient. The depot manager barely glanced at her as she struggled to lift her trunk. Other travelers moved around her like water around a stone, and Zelda felt the weight of failure pressing down on her shoulders. She had traveled all the way from Boston with such hope, responding to Frederick's advertisement for a refined, educated bride. What a fool she had been to think those words meant he actually wanted someone who could discuss literature and mathematics. He had wanted someone who could read his newspaper to him, nothing more. "Madam, you cannot leave that trunk there," the depot manager called out, tobacco juice staining the corner of his mouth. "We close in an hour." Zelda gripped the handle of her trunk and pulled, managing to drag it a few feet before her arms screamed in protest. The leather-bound books inside made it impossibly heavy, but she would sooner die than leave them behind. They represented everything she had worked for, every late night studying by candlelight, every penny saved for tuition at the Women's Academy. "Need some help with that?" The voice came from behind her, deep and warm like sun-heated honey. Zelda turned to find a man watching her, his hat pushed back to reveal sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of sage in summer. He was tall and lean, with the kind of broad shoulders that came from real work, not gymnasium exercises. Dust covered his boots and the legs of his worn denim pants, and he held himself with an easy confidence that spoke of someone comfortable in his own skin. "I can manage," Zelda said automatically, though her trembling arms suggested otherwise. The man did not move away. Instead, he studied her with an intensity that made her acutely aware of her wrinkled traveling dress and the tendrils of dark hair that had escaped her bun. "That trunk looks like it weighs more than you do, and I was raised to help people when they need it, whether they admit it or not." Before Zelda could protest, he had stepped forward and hefted her trunk with an ease that made her months of carefully maintained independence seem suddenly fragile. He settled it on his shoulder as though it weighed nothing at all. "Where are you headed?" he asked. That was the question, was it not? Zelda had no answer. She had spent every dollar she possessed on the journey to Frederick's ranch, expecting to become a wife, to finally have a home of her own. The return ticket had been paid, but that was the extent of Frederick's dubious generosity. She had perhaps $3 in her reticule and nowhere to go. "The nearest boarding house, I suppose," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. The man's expression shifted, something like understanding crossing his features. "You are the mail-order bride, are not you?" The one Carlyle sent back. Heat flooded Zelda's cheeks. Of course the gossip had already spread. In a town like Oklahoma City, still rough around the edges despite its recent growth, news traveled faster than telegraph wires. "I am Zelda Lancaster, yes. And Mr. Carlyle found me unsuitable for his needs. His loss." The man adjusted the trunk on his shoulder. "I am Ethan Whitmore. I have a ranch about 5 miles outside town. Been in town picking up supplies." He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. "I also heard Carlyle sent you back because you were too educated." "That true?" Zelda lifted her chin, defiance sparking in her chest despite her exhaustion. I have a degree from the Boston Academy for Young Women. I can read Greek and Latin. I have studied mathematics through calculus, and I have read more books than Mr. Carlyle has likely seen in his lifetime. If that makes me unsuitable, then yes, it is true. A slow smile spread across Ethan's face, transforming his features from merely handsome to something that made Zelda's breath catch. That sounds just about perfect to me. I beg your pardon, I cannot read, Ethan said simply, the admission carrying no shame, only matter-of-fact honesty. Never had the chance to learn. My father died when I was 8, and I had to work to help feed my mother and sisters. By the time they were grown and settled, I figured I was too old and too stupid to start. You are neither old nor stupid, Zelda said automatically, her teacher's instincts rising to the surface. Reading is a skill that can be learned at any age given proper instruction. Is that so? Ethan's eyes held hers, something hopeful flickering in their depths. Then I have a proposition for you, Miss Lancaster. I need someone to teach me to read and write properly. More than that, I need to learn all the things I missed out on. Mathematics, history, everything. And you need a place to stay and a way to earn money. Seems like we could help each other out. Zelda's mind raced. The offer was irregular, certainly, but what choice did she have? She could not return to Boston, not after leaving her position as a teacher's assistant to pursue this disastrous marriage prospect. The boarding house would drain her meager funds within days. And there was something in Ethan's eyes, an earnest hunger for knowledge that resonated with something deep in her soul. What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Whitmore? Call me Ethan. And I am proposing honest employment. I have a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, who lives in the small house on my property with her husband. They have been with me for 3 years. You could stay there too in the spare room. It would be proper and respectable. In exchange for teaching me everything you know, I would pay you a fair wage and provide room and board. If it does not work out, I will pay your passage to wherever you want to go. It was impulsive and possibly foolish, but Zelda found herself nodding. Very well, Mr. Whitmore. Ethan, I accept your offer. The ride to Ethan's ranch gave Zelda her first real look at Oklahoma territory. The land stretched out in rolling waves of golden grass, broken occasionally by stands of cottonwood trees and the red soil that gave the territory its name. The sky seemed impossibly vast, a blue dome that made Boston's narrow streets feel like a distant dream. Ethan drove the wagon with capable hands, pointing out landmarks as they traveled. That creek there runs year-round, he said, gesturing to a line of green vegetation. Good water, never failed me yet. And those hills in the distance, that is where the wild horses run sometimes. Most beautiful thing you will ever see, watching them move across the land like they are flying. Zelda listened, noting the poetry in his words even if he could not write them down. There was an intelligence in Ethan that had nothing to do with books and everything to do with observation and understanding. He read the land the way she read texts, finding meaning in the subtle shifts of grass and sky. Tell me about Boston, Ethan said as they crested a hill. I have never been further east than Missouri. So Zelda told him about the cobblestone streets and the harbor thick with ships, about the academy where young women gathered to learn subjects most people believed were beyond feminine comprehension. She told him about the libraries that smelled of old paper and leather, about the thrill of solving a difficult equation or translating a particularly challenging passage of Greek. You loved it there, Ethan observed. Why did you leave? The question struck at the heart of things. Zelda was quiet for a moment, watching the grass ripple in the wind. I was not married by 23. The other teachers began to see me as a spinster, someone to be pitied, and I suppose I wanted something more than being an assistant forever. I wanted my own home, my own family. Frederick's advertisement spoke of wanting an educated wife, someone to help build a cultured life on the frontier. I thought perhaps I could have both, the intellectual life I loved and the domestic happiness I craved. And instead you got Frederick Carlyle, who could not handle a woman who knew more than him. Precisely. Ethan made a noise that might have been disgust. I have known Fred for 5 years. He is good with cattle and he pays his debts on time, but he has got the imagination of a fence post and the temperament to match. You are better off without him. The ranch house appeared as they rounded a bend, and Zelda felt her breath catch. It was not large, but it was well built, with a wide porch and real glass windows that caught the afternoon sun. A barn stood nearby, painted red and white, and she could see cattle dotting the landscape beyond. Chickens scratched in a yard, and a dog emerged from the porch, tail wagging. "This is beautiful," Zelda said, meaning it. Pride flickered across Ethan's face. "Built most of it myself with help from the Chen family. Started with just a soddy 5 years ago, but I have been building it up bit by bit. Got 200 head of cattle now, and I am saving to expand the grazing land." A woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was Chinese, perhaps 40, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. A man followed her, taller and broader, his face weathered by sun and wind. "Mrs. Chen, Mr. Chen," Ethan called out as he brought the wagon to a stop. "This is Miss Zelda Lancaster. She is going to be staying in your spare room and working as my teacher." Mrs. Chen's eyes widened slightly, but she recovered quickly, moving forward with a welcoming smile. "Teacher. That is wonderful. Ethan has needed proper learning for a long time. Come, Miss Lancaster, let me show you where you will stay." The spare room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the prairie. Someone had placed wildflowers in a jar on the small table, a touch of beauty that made Zelda's throat tighten with unexpected emotion. "The house has 2 rooms and a main living area," Mrs. Chen explained. "My husband and I have the larger room. You will have privacy here. We eat breakfast at dawn, dinner at noon, and supper at dusk. You are welcome to join us, or Ethan said he will provide you a meal stipend if you prefer to eat at the main house." "Eating with you would be lovely, if you do not mind," Zelda said. The thought of eating alone in the main house with Ethan seemed too intimate, too irregular. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. "Good. I will tell you plain, Miss Lancaster. Ethan Whitmore is a good man. He helped my husband and me when no one else would. We had nowhere to go, and he gave us work and a home without asking questions. He works hard, he is honest, and he treats people fairly. You will be safe here." The reassurance settled something anxious in Zelda's chest. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen. I appreciate your kindness." That evening, after a supper of beans and cornbread that was simple but satisfying, Ethan appeared at the Chen's door with an armful of supplies. He had paper, pencils, chalk, and a slate board, all brand new from the general store. "Figured we would need these," he said, almost shyly. "For the lessons." Zelda took the supplies, touched by his eagerness. "These are perfect. Should we start tomorrow, tonight?" Ethan said immediately. "If you are not too tired. I have waited 30 years to learn to read. I do not want to wait another day." They settled on the porch of the main house, where the evening light was still good. Zelda arranged the slate and chalk, considering where to begin. Ethan sat across from her, his large hands folded on the table, watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "We will start with the alphabet," Zelda said, drawing the first letter. "This is A. It makes the sound ah as in apple or I as in ache." Ethan leaned forward, studying the letter as though it held the secrets of the universe. When Zelda handed him the chalk, he took it carefully, his calloused fingers awkward around the small piece. His first attempt at copying the letter was shaky, the lines uneven. "Like this?" he asked. "Exactly like that," Zelda said warmly. "You are already writing. Now let us continue." They worked until the light failed, moving through the alphabet one letter at a time. Ethan was intensely focused, asking questions about sounds and shapes, his mind clearly sharp even if his hand was unpracticed. When Zelda finally called an end to the lesson, he looked almost disappointed. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. "Same time tomorrow," Zelda agreed. "But Ethan, you need to practice. Copy these letters until you can make them without thinking. The muscle memory is as important as the knowledge." "I will," he promised. "I will practice every spare moment I have," and he did. Over the following days, Zelda discovered that Ethan was unlike any student she had ever taught. He approached learning with a fierce determination, practicing his letters while he ate breakfast, sounding out words while he worked with the cattle, carrying a small slate in his pocket so he could write whenever he had a spare moment. His hands, so skilled at roping and building, slowly learned the different skill of forming letters and words. Within a week, he could write his name. Within 2, he could read simple sentences. His progress was remarkable, fueled by years of pent-up desire to access the world of written language. "Why did you never hire someone to teach you before?" Zelda asked one evening as they sat on the porch, working through a basic reader she had created from her own knowledge. Ethan was quiet for a moment, his finger following the words on the page. "Pride, mostly. I did not want people to know I could not read. Out here, a man's reputation matters. If people think you are ignorant, they will try to cheat you. I learned to get by, having documents read to me by people I trusted, making my mark instead of signing my name. But I always felt like I was missing something, like there was a whole world just out of my reach. And now," Zelda prompted gently, "now I feel like someone opened a door I did not know existed." He looked up from the page, meeting her eyes. "You have given me something incredible, Zelda. I do not think you realize how much this means." The sincerity in his voice made Zelda's chest tighten. "You are the one doing the work. I am simply providing guidance. It is more than that." Ethan set down the reader, his expression serious. "You believe I can do this. You do not treat me like I am stupid or slow. You just teach me, like it is the most natural thing in the world. That belief matters more than you know." As summer deepened into August, their lessons expanded beyond basic literacy. Ethan absorbed knowledge like parched earth absorbing rain. They moved from simple readers to newspapers, and Zelda watched his face light up the first time he read a complete article on his own. She introduced him to arithmetic beyond basic counting, showing him how to calculate percentages and interest rates, knowledge that would serve him well in managing his ranch finances. "The bank has been calculating my loan interest," Ethan said one afternoon, working through a problem Zelda had set him. "I never questioned it because I could not check their numbers. But looking at this now, I think they might have been overcharging me." They spent the next hour going through his bank statements, Ethan reading the documents himself for the first time. When they finished, his jaw was tight with controlled anger. 3 years, he said quietly. 3 years of paying too much because I could not read well enough to check. "Now you can," Zelda pointed out, "and you can go to the bank tomorrow and demand a correction. Thanks to you." Ethan looked at her, something warm and deep in his gaze. "You are changing my life, Zelda. Every single day you are changing everything." The intensity of his words made Zelda's breath catch. Over the weeks of teaching him, she had come to know Ethan in ways that went beyond student and teacher. She knew he woke before dawn to check on the cattle, that he sang quietly to himself when he thought no one was listening, that he had a soft spot for the barn cats and always made sure they had milk. She knew he was unfailingly kind to the Chen family, that he paid fair wages and never raised his voice in anger. She knew the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the sound of his laugh, the careful way he held a pencil as though it were something precious. And somewhere along the way, without quite meaning to, she had begun to fall in love with him. The realization came one evening in late August when a storm rolled across the prairie. Zelda stood at her window, watching lightning split the sky, and found herself worrying about Ethan out checking on the cattle. When she saw him riding back through the rain, safe and whole, the relief that flooded through her was so intense it nearly brought her to her knees. This was not the mild affection she had felt for Frederick Carlyle, built on letters and expectations. This was something wild and fierce, rooted in daily proximity and genuine connection. She loved his mind and his determination. She loved his kindness and his strength. She loved the way he looked at her like she had hung the moon, the way he treated her knowledge as valuable rather than threatening. But what could she do with this love? She was his employee, his teacher. He had never indicated that he saw her as anything more. The arrangement was meant to be professional, beneficial to both parties, but nothing beyond that. Zelda could not risk her position by revealing feelings that might not be reciprocated. She resolved to keep her growing emotions to herself, to maintain the professional distance that their situation required. It was the sensible thing to do, the practical thing. But sense and practicality had never accounted for the way her heart jumped when Ethan smiled at her, or the way her skin seemed to warm when their hands accidentally brushed as she handed him a book. September brought cooler nights and the beginning of autumn colors in the cottonwoods. Ethan's reading had progressed to the point where he could tackle more complex texts. Zelda introduced him to poetry, watching his face as he worked through Wordsworth and Whitman, sounding out the words and then pausing to absorb their meaning. "I never knew words could do this," he said one evening, reading a passage from Leaves of Grass. "I knew songs and stories people told, but this is different. This is like music and painting combined, except it is just words on a page." "That is the beauty of literature," Zelda said softly. "It allows us to experience the world through someone else's eyes, to feel things we might never otherwise feel." Ethan looked up from the page. "Read something to me. I want to hear how it is supposed to sound." Zelda took the book, finding one of her favorite passages. Her voice rose and fell with the rhythm of Whitman's lines, the words flowing like water. When she finished, Ethan was staring at her with an expression she could not quite read. "What is it?" she asked. "You are beautiful when you read," he said quietly. "I have thought so since that first lesson. The way you love the words, the way you bring them to life, it is like watching someone perform magic." Heat crept up Zelda's neck. "I simply appreciate good writing. It is more than that." Ethan set the book aside, leaning forward. "Zelda, these past 2 months have been the best of my life. And it is not just about learning to read, though that has been incredible. It is about spending time with you, getting to know you. I look forward to our lessons more than anything else in my day, and not because of the education." Zelda's heart hammered against her ribs. "Ethan, let me finish," he said, his voice steady despite the vulnerability in his eyes. "I know this is not what we agreed to. I know you came here to teach, and I promised you professional employment. But I cannot keep pretending that I do not feel something more. You are brilliant and kind and passionate about learning. You see value in things other people overlook. You saw value in me when I was just an illiterate rancher. I am falling in love with you, Zelda. Actually, I think I fell in love with you that first day at the depot when you lifted your chin and declared your education with such pride." Tears pricked at Zelda's eyes. "I thought I was the only one feeling this way. I have been trying so hard to maintain proper boundaries, to not let my feelings show." "Then you feel it too?" Hope lit Ethan's face. "Yes," Zelda whispered. "I love you. I love your mind and your heart and your determination. I love who you are and who you are becoming. I love teaching you, but more than that, I love simply being near you." Ethan stood, moving around the table to take her hands in his. His palms were rough with calluses, warm and solid. "Zelda Lancaster, I know I am not what you expected when you came west. I know I am not educated or refined. But I promise you this. I will spend the rest of my life learning and growing. I will be a man worthy of your intelligence and your love, and I will never, ever make you feel like you need to be less than you are." "You are already worthy," Zelda said, rising to meet him. "You always have been. Education does not determine a person's value. You are good and honest and hardworking. You treat people with respect and kindness. Those are the things that matter." "Then marry me," Ethan said, the words simple but weighted with meaning. "Be my wife, not my teacher. Though I hope you will never stop teaching me, because I will never stop wanting to learn from you. Let me love you the way you deserve to be loved, as an equal and a partner." "Yes," Zelda breathed. "Yes, I will marry you." Ethan cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs brushing away the tears that had spilled onto her cheeks. When he kissed her, it was gentle and reverent, a promise sealed with touch. Zelda leaned into him, feeling safe and cherished and utterly, completely loved. The wedding was held 3 weeks later, a simple affair at the small church in Oklahoma City. Mrs. Chen stood as witness, beaming with joy, while Mr. Chen shook Ethan's hand with solemn approval. The preacher, a kind-faced man named Reverend Thompson, performed the ceremony with warmth, speaking about partnerships and mutual respect in a way that made Zelda think he truly understood what marriage should be. Ethan had bought her a ring, a simple gold band that fit perfectly. When he slipped it onto her finger, his hand was steady, his eyes shining with happiness. Zelda had never felt more certain of anything in her life than she did in that moment, promising to love and cherish this remarkable man. They held a small celebration at the ranch, Mrs. Chen preparing a feast that seemed to cover every surface of the dining table. Neighbors came to offer congratulations, and Zelda found herself welcomed into the community with a warmth she had not expected. These frontier people, rough and practical as they might seem, valued substance over pretension. They appreciated that Ethan had found someone who made him happy, and they were curious about the educated woman from Boston who had chosen to stay. "Never thought I would see Ethan Whitmore married," one of the older ranchers said, shaking Zelda's hand with genuine pleasure. "He is a good man, one of the best. You take care of each other now." As night fell and the guests departed, Ethan and Zelda stood on the porch of the main house, watching stars emerge in the vast prairie sky. The house was truly theirs now, Mrs. Chen having insisted that the newlyweds needed their privacy. She and her husband had moved Zelda's belongings into the main house that afternoon, arranging them in the bedroom with tactful efficiency. "Are you happy?" Ethan asked, his arm around Zelda's waist. "Incredibly," Zelda said, leaning into his warmth. "I came west expecting one life and found something entirely different, something better. Frederick Carlyle did me the greatest favor of my life when he sent you back," Ethan said. "If he had kept you, I never would have met you. Then I suppose I should be grateful for his short-sightedness." Zelda turned to face her husband, still marveling at that word, husband, hers. "Though I doubt he sees it that way, his regret my joy." Ethan kissed her forehead, then her cheeks, then finally her lips. "Come inside, Mrs. Whitmore. Let me show you just how much I love having a wife who is too educated." Their first months of marriage were a revelation. Zelda had expected married life to involve compromise and adjustment, and it did, but not in the ways she had anticipated. Instead of feeling constrained, she felt freed. Ethan genuinely wanted her opinions on everything from ranch management to crop rotation to which bull to purchase for breeding. He listened when she explained the mathematics of feed costs versus cattle prices, and he implemented her suggestions about record keeping that allowed them to track expenses and profits with unprecedented accuracy. In turn, Zelda learned the rhythms of ranch life. She learned to read the sky for weather changes, to understand the signs that indicated a cow was about to calve, to appreciate the satisfaction of physical labor. She helped Mrs. Chen with the garden, learning to coax vegetables from the Oklahoma soil. She learned to ride properly, Ethan teaching her with the same patience she had shown him during reading lessons. Their evening lessons continued, but they had evolved. Now they read together, discussing ideas and interpretations. Ethan had developed a particular love for history, fascinated by accounts of ancient Rome and Greece. He asked thoughtful questions, making connections between historical events and contemporary politics that showed a sophisticated understanding of human nature. "If I had known learning could be like this," he said one evening, closing a volume on the Roman Republic, "I would have fought harder to find a way when I was young." "You are learning now," Zelda pointed out. "That is what matters." "And Ethan, you must understand that you have taught me just as much as I have taught you. You have shown me different ways of knowing, different types of intelligence. You read the land and the animals with a skill I could never match. You understand weather patterns and ecological systems in ways that no book could fully capture. Intelligence is not just about formal education." Ethan pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "We make a good team, you and I." "The best team," Zelda agreed. As autumn turned to winter, Zelda began to suspect that their partnership was going to expand in a new way. She missed her monthly courses, her body felt different, and certain smells that had never bothered her before now made her stomach turn. When she shared her suspicions with Mrs. Chen, the older woman's face lit up with joy. "A baby." "Oh, Miss Zelda, this is wonderful news. Have you told Ethan yet?" "Not yet," Zelda admitted. "I want to be certain first. And Mrs. Chen, please call me Zelda. We have been friends for months now." Mrs. Chen smiled, squeezing Zelda's hand. "Then you must call me Lily. And you should tell Ethan soon. He will be overjoyed." Zelda waited until that evening when she and Ethan were settled in their bedroom, the day's work complete. He was practicing his handwriting, copying passages from a book of essays, his hand now steady and sure. "Ethan," she said softly, "I have something to tell you." He set down his pencil immediately, giving her his full attention. "What is it?" "I am fairly certain I am with child. We are going to have a baby." For a moment, Ethan simply stared at her. Then his face broke into the widest smile Zelda had ever seen. He stood, crossing to her in 2 strides, and swept her into his arms with a gentleness that belied his excitement. "A baby," he repeated, wonder in his voice. "We are going to have a baby. Zelda, this is incredible. Are you happy? Are you scared? What do you need?" Zelda laughed, holding him tight. "I am both happy and scared, and what I need is exactly what you are already giving me, your love and support." "You will have that always," Ethan promised. "And our child will have something I never did, the chance to learn from the beginning. We will teach our son or daughter everything together." "Our child will be very lucky," Zelda said, her hand settling over her still flat stomach. Lucky to have a father who values knowledge and a mother who values practical wisdom. Lucky to grow up in a home filled with love and respect. The winter passed gently. Zelda's pregnancy progressed without major complications, though she tired more easily and had to abandon some of her more strenuous activities. Ethan became even more solicitous, taking over tasks she had previously handled and worrying over her health with an intensity that was both endearing and occasionally frustrating. "I am pregnant, not an invalid," she reminded him when he tried to prevent her from carrying a small basket of laundry. "I know," Ethan said, taking the basket anyway. "But indulge me. I have never done this before, and I want to make sure you are both safe." Lily Chen proved invaluable, sharing knowledge from her own 3 pregnancies back in California before she and her husband had made their way to Oklahoma. She taught Zelda about nutrition and exercise, about preparing for the birth and caring for a newborn. The 2 women spent long winter afternoons together, sewing baby clothes and talking about everything from Chinese herbal medicine to American suffrage movements. "You have made a good life here," Lily observed one day, her needle moving steadily through soft cotton. "Different from what you planned, but good." "Better than what I planned," Zelda corrected. "If I had married Frederick, I would have been miserable. Here, I have purpose and partnership and love." Spring arrived with a burst of wildflowers and new calves. Zelda's belly had swollen impressively, and she felt the baby moving constantly now, little flutters and kicks that never failed to amaze her. Ethan loved to place his hand on her stomach and feel the movements, his face always filled with wonder at the life they had created together. "Have you thought about names?" he asked one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I have some ideas," Zelda said. "For a boy, perhaps Daniel. It means God is my judge, and I have always liked the sound of it." "Daniel Whitmore," Ethan tested the name. "I like that. And for a girl, Rose," Zelda said immediately. "It was my grandmother's name, and she was the one who encouraged my education when everyone else said it was impractical." "Rose Whitmore," Ethan smiled. "Beautiful, like her mother will be beautiful." The baby came in late April, during a thunderstorm that shook the windows and turned the world gray with rain. Lily attended Zelda through the labor, her calm presence and experienced hands providing both comfort and practical assistance. Ethan paced outside the bedroom door, forbidden entry by long-standing tradition but clearly desperate to be near his wife. When the baby finally emerged with a lusty cry, Lily cleaned him quickly and placed him in Zelda's arms. "A son," she announced, opening the door to let Ethan in. "A healthy, strong son." Ethan entered the room like a man in a dream, his eyes fixed on the bundle in Zelda's arms. When he sat beside her on the bed, his hand shaking slightly as he touched the baby's tiny fist, tears tracked down his cheeks unashamedly. "He is perfect," Ethan whispered. "Zelda, he is absolutely perfect." "Daniel," Zelda said softly, watching their son. "Daniel Whitmore, welcome to the world, little one." Daniel proved to be a content baby, nursing well and sleeping in reasonable stretches. Ethan was a devoted father from the first moment, handling his son with a gentleness that belied his rough hands. He sang to Daniel, spoke to him constantly, and promised him a future filled with opportunities. "You will learn everything," Ethan told his son, cradling him against his chest while Zelda rested. "You will learn to read and write and cipher. You will learn to rope cattle and raid the sky. Your mother and I will teach you to value both knowledge and practical skill, to respect all people regardless of their circumstances. You will be a good man, Daniel, an educated man and a wise man." Watching them together, Zelda felt her heart swell with love so intense it almost hurt. This was the family she had dreamed of, the partnership she had longed for. Not built on pretense or societal expectations, but on genuine connection and mutual respect. As Daniel grew from an infant to a toddler, the ranch prospered. Ethan's newfound literacy allowed him to negotiate better prices for his cattle, to understand contracts before signing them, to manage his finances with precision. Zelda kept the books, her mathematical skills ensuring that every dollar was accounted for and wisely spent. Together, they built something remarkable, a successful ranch that operated on principles of fairness and intelligence. When Daniel was 2 years old, Zelda became pregnant again. This pregnancy felt different from the first, easier in some ways and harder in others. She was more tired, chasing after an active toddler while growing another baby, but she was also more confident, knowing what to expect. Their daughter arrived in the fall, during the season of harvest and cooling temperatures. Rose Whitmore entered the world with less drama than her brother, slipping into Zelda's arms as though she had been waiting patiently for the right moment. She had Ethan's eyes and Zelda's dark hair, and from her first days, she displayed a serene temperament that was entirely her own. "Now we are complete," Ethan said, holding Rose while Daniel climbed onto the bed to meet his sister. "2 children, both healthy and beautiful. Blessed," Zelda corrected gently. "We are blessed beyond measure." The years that followed were full and rich. Daniel started lessons at age 4, learning his letters with the same intensity his father had shown. Rose followed her brother in everything, her curiosity endless. Ethan continued his own education, moving through increasingly complex texts and developing a particular interest in agricultural science. He began experimenting with different grazing techniques, implementing ideas he had read about in journals that Zelda helped him obtain from back east. The ranch expanded. They purchased adjoining land, increasing their herd and building a reputation for quality cattle and fair dealing. Other ranchers began to ask Ethan's advice, and he was elected to the local Cattlemen's Association, where his literacy and analytical skills made him a valuable member. Zelda established a small school on their property, teaching not just her own children, but also the children of neighboring ranchers and the few families who lived in the surrounding area. She taught reading and mathematics, science and literature, offering education to any child whose parents wanted them to learn. Some people criticized her, suggesting that too much education made people dissatisfied with ranch life, but Zelda persisted. She believed in the power of knowledge to improve lives, and she was determined to provide opportunities that might not otherwise exist. When Daniel was 8 and Rose was 6, Ethan suggested a trip to Boston. "I want to see where you came from," he explained. "I want to understand the place that shaped you, and I want our children to see that there is a wider world beyond Oklahoma." The journey was an adventure. They traveled by train, the children pressed against the windows to see the changing landscape. Zelda watched Ethan read the newspapers they purchased at various stations, watched him help Daniel with his own reading, watched him explain the geography they were passing through to Rose. This was a different man from the one who had picked up her trunk at the depot 6 years ago. Educated now, confident in ways that went beyond physical capability. Boston impressed and overwhelmed the family in equal measure. The crowds and noise, the tall buildings and busy harbor, the sheer density of humanity was unlike anything on the open prairie. Zelda took them to her old academy, now expanded and flourishing. The headmistress, Mrs. Harrington, greeted Zelda with genuine warmth. "My dear Miss Lancaster, or should I say Mrs. Whitmore, we have missed you terribly. The girls still speak of your mathematics lessons with awe." "I am teaching again," Zelda said, though in a very different setting. "May I introduce my husband, Ethan, and our children, Daniel and Rose, Mrs." Harrington's eyes widened slightly as she took in Ethan's rough rancher's clothes and weathered face, but when he shook her hand and spoke with articulate courtesy, her expression shifted to respect. "Mrs. Whitmore has told me about the excellent education provided here," Ethan said. "I am grateful for the foundation you gave her. She has used that education to improve many lives, including my own." They spent a week in Boston, visiting museums and libraries, attending a concert and a lecture at Harvard. Ethan absorbed everything with hungry interest, asking questions and making observations that showed his sophisticated understanding. Daniel and Rose were similarly enthralled, their young minds expanding to encompass these new experiences. But when it came time to leave, Zelda felt nothing but relief and eagerness to return home. Boston was impressive, but it was no longer hers. Home was the wide prairie, the ranch house with its porch and view of endless sky, the community they had built and the life they were living. "Did you ever regret staying?" Ethan asked on the train ride back, Daniel asleep against his shoulder and Rose curled against Zelda. "Not for a single moment," Zelda said truthfully. "Boston gave me education and opportunity, and I am grateful for that. But Oklahoma gave me purpose and love and a real partnership. I would not trade what we have for anything." The train carried them west through the changing landscape, back to the red earth and golden grass of home. When they finally arrived at the ranch, greeted by Lily and her husband with joy and a feast, Zelda felt the rightness of it settle deep in her bones. This was where she belonged, with this man and these children, building a life that honored both intellectual pursuit and practical wisdom. Years continued to pass, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the growing of children. Daniel developed a passion for veterinary medicine, reading every book on animal health he could find and apprenticing with the local veterinarian during his teenage years. Rose showed a talent for mathematics that exceeded even Zelda's, solving complex problems with an intuitive understanding that suggested a brilliant future. Ethan continued to read voraciously, his interests expanding to include philosophy and political theory. He and Zelda spent countless evenings discussing ideas, debating interpretations, challenging each other's thinking. He served on the town council, advocating for education funding and fair business practices. People respected him not despite his late start to education, but because of what he had achieved through determination and hard work. The ranch prospered beyond their initial dreams. They employed several hands, treating them fairly and paying good wages. They became known throughout the territory for quality livestock and ethical business dealings. Other ranchers sought Ethan's advice, and Zelda's school had grown to serve nearly 20 students, with parents traveling from miles around to give their children access to quality education. When Daniel was 18, he announced his intention to attend veterinary college in Kansas. Zelda felt both pride and a pang of loss as her son prepared to leave, but Ethan was unequivocally supportive. "You go and learn everything you can," he told Daniel. "Then you come back here and help the ranchers in this territory. We need someone with your skills and your integrity." Rose, at 16, was already corresponding with professors at women's colleges, her mathematical papers impressing academics who could not believe such sophisticated work came from a teenage girl on an Oklahoma ranch. She intended to pursue higher mathematics, to contribute to the field in ways that would have been impossible for a woman just a generation earlier. "You gave them this," Ethan said to Zelda, watching their children with paternal pride. "Your refusal to accept that education was wasted on you, your determination to use your knowledge, It gave our children possibilities I never dreamed could exist. We gave them this, Zelda corrected. Your support, your belief that knowledge matters, your example of never stopping learning, that is just as important as any lesson I taught. They see what a true partnership looks like, what mutual respect creates. That is the greatest gift we could give them. On a warm evening in June, with the prairie grass golden in the sunset and the ranch house windows glowing with lamplight, Ethan and Zelda sat on their porch. It had been 18 years since that day at the depot. 18 years since a humiliated mail-order bride had met an illiterate rancher, and they had found in each other the missing pieces of themselves. Daniel was away at school, excelling in his studies and sending letters filled with enthusiasm for his work. Rose was in the house, working on a mathematical proof that she hoped to present at an academic conference. Lily and her husband were in their own home, preparing for their daughter's visit with her grandchildren. The ranch was thriving, the cattle healthy, the land well managed. "You ever think about Frederick Carlyle?" Ethan asked, his arm around Zelda's waist, her head on his shoulder. "Rarely," Zelda admitted. "And when I do, it is only to thank him silently for being exactly who he was. If he had been different, if he had valued my education, I would never have found you." "I think about him sometimes," Ethan confessed. "And I wonder if he ever realized what he lost when he sent you away. Though I hope he found happiness eventually, some woman who suited his needs better. But I am grateful every day that you were not that woman." "I was too educated for him," Zelda said with a smile, repeating the words that had once stung. "And you said, 'Teach me everything you know.' You saw my education as valuable, not threatening. You wanted to learn and grow alongside me. That made all the difference." "You have taught me so much," Ethan said softly. "How to read and write, yes, but also how to think critically, how to question assumptions, how to never stop seeking knowledge. You taught me that intelligence comes in many forms and that a true partnership means respecting your spouse's strengths. You taught me that love means encouraging each other to become the best versions of yourselves. And you taught me," Zelda replied, "that education without compassion is empty. That knowledge is only valuable when used to improve lives. That strength comes from integrity and kindness, not just intellect. You taught me what it means to be truly seen and appreciated for who I am, not who someone wants me to be." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to emerge, the vast Oklahoma sky darkening to deep blue and then black. Inside the house, they could hear Rose moving around, probably still working on her mathematics. From the barn, one of the horses whinnied, a peaceful sound that spoke of contentment. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Ethan asked. "When I offered to help with your trunk." "I said I could manage," Zelda recalled with a laugh. "I was too proud and too hurt to accept help. And I said you were better off without Carlyle. I meant it then, but I had no idea I would be lucky enough to be the one who got to love you instead." "The luck was mine," Zelda insisted. "You saw me when I felt invisible. You valued me when someone else had found me worthless. You asked me to teach you, not because you wanted to diminish me, but because you genuinely wanted to learn. How could I not fall in love with that? We saved each other," Ethan said. "That is what I think. You needed someone who appreciated your mind, and I needed someone who saw past my lack of formal education to the person underneath. We found each other at exactly the right moment, when we were both ready to build something real." As the night deepened and the prairie wind whispered through the grass, Ethan and Zelda remained on their porch, holding each other close. They spoke of their children and their plans, of books they wanted to read and improvements they wanted to make to the ranch. They spoke of the future with optimism, and the past with gratitude. When they finally went inside, Moving through the house they had built together in so many ways, Zelda paused to look at the bookshelves that lined the walls. Volumes of literature and history, agricultural science and mathematics, philosophy and poetry. Some had been hers from the beginning, carried in that heavy trunk from Boston. Others they had acquired together over the years, building a library that reflected their shared love of learning. In the bedroom, Ethan pulled her close, kissing her with a tenderness that had only deepened over 18 years of marriage. "I love you," he said simply. "My brilliant, beautiful wife. Thank you for choosing me, for staying with me, for building this life with me." "Thank you for asking me to teach you," Zelda replied, her hands framing his face. "Thank you for being teachable, for valuing knowledge, for never making me feel like I was too much. Thank you for loving all of me, even the parts someone else rejected." They made love with the ease of long familiarity, knowing each other's bodies as well as they knew each other's minds. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Zelda thought about the strange path that had brought her to this moment. She had been returned like a piece of defective merchandise, her greatest assets deemed liabilities. She had stood at that depot, humiliated and uncertain, with no idea what would come next. And then, a cowboy had offered to carry her trunk and changed everything. He had said, "Teach me everything you know," and meant it with his whole heart. He had been hungry for knowledge, eager to learn, willing to grow. And in teaching him, Zelda had found her own purpose expanding, her own understanding deepening. Their partnership had created something beautiful: a thriving ranch, successful children, a community that valued education and fairness. But more than that, it had created a love that sustained them both, a connection built on mutual respect and genuine appreciation for each other's strengths. 5 years later, when Daniel returned from veterinary college and opened his practice near the ranch, bringing with him a wife he had met at school, Zelda and Ethan stood together watching their son begin his own life. Rose was away at college, earning accolades for her mathematical work and sending letters full of excitement about her research. "We did well," Ethan said, watching Daniel hang his shingle. "We did," Zelda agreed, "and we are not finished yet." They continued to teach, to learn, to grow. Ethan wrote articles on ranch management that were published in agricultural journals, his literacy and insights benefiting ranchers across the territory. Zelda expanded her school, training other teachers and creating a curriculum that balanced academic rigor with practical skills. When Oklahoma became a state in 1907, Ethan was there to sign his name to the petition supporting statehood, his signature clear and confident. He served in the first state legislature, advocating for education funding and rural development. Zelda stood beside him, advising and supporting, her mind as sharp as ever. They celebrated their 25th anniversary with their children and grandchildren gathered around them. Daniel had 2 children of his own now, both showing early signs of their grandmother's intellectual curiosity. Rose had married a fellow mathematician, and they were expecting their first child. "To another 25 years," Ethan toasted, raising his glass to Zelda. "To forever," Zelda corrected, clinking her glass against his. "To the cowboy who asked me to teach him everything I knew, and who taught me just as much in return." As they looked out over the ranch they had built, the family they had raised, the life they had created together, Zelda remembered that desperate woman at the depot, clutching her trunk and her wounded pride. She remembered the humiliation of being rejected, the fear of an uncertain future. And she remembered the voice that had offered help, the man who had seen value where someone else had seen only inconvenience. Being returned for being too educated had been the greatest gift of her life. It had brought her to Ethan, to this partnership, to this love. She had taught him to read, but he had taught her what it meant to be truly valued. She had given him access to the world of written knowledge, but he had given her a home, a purpose, a love that celebrated rather than diminished her. They grew old together on the prairie, their love deepening with each passing year. They watched their grandchildren learn to read, to rope cattle, to balance intellect and practical wisdom. They sat on their porch every evening, discussing ideas and sharing observations, two minds that challenged and complemented each other. When Ethan was 78 and Zelda 76, they celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary. The ranch was now run by Daniel, who had proven as capable at management as he was at veterinary medicine. Rose taught mathematics at a university, her published work contributing significantly to her field. The school Zelda had founded had grown into a proper academy, educating hundreds of children and employing a dozen teachers. 50 years, Ethan marveled, holding Zelda's hand. Half a century since I picked up your trunk at the depot. The best 50 years, Zelda said, her voice still strong despite her age. Every single day with you has been a gift. You saved my life, Ethan said seriously. Not just by teaching me to read, though that changed everything, but by seeing me as I could be, not just as I was. By believing in my capacity to learn and grow, by loving me enough to push me to become better. You saved mine too, Zelda replied. You valued what someone else had rejected. You made me feel treasured instead of burdensome. You created a space where I could be fully myself, all of my intelligence and passion and opinions. You never tried to make me smaller to make yourself feel bigger. They sat together as the sun set over the prairie they had called home for so many years, the land they had worked and loved and prospered on. Their children and grandchildren were inside, preparing a celebration feast. But for this moment, it was just the two of them, the mail-order bride who had been returned and the cowboy who had asked her to teach him everything she knew. I would do it all again, Ethan said softly. Every moment, every challenge, every joy. All of it exactly the same as long as it led me back to you. As would I, Zelda whispered, leaning against him. 1,000 times over, I would choose you and this life and this love. They went inside to join their family, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived. Children who were happy and successful, grandchildren who were curious and kind. A home filled with books and laughter and love. The meal was joyous, full of stories and toasts and celebrations of 50 years of partnership. That night, lying in bed together, Ethan pulled Zelda close. Thank you, he said simply. For what? Zelda asked, though she knew, for staying, for teaching me, for loving me. For building this incredible life with me, for being too educated for Frederick Carlyle and perfect for me. Zelda smiled in the darkness. Thank you for asking me to teach you. Thank you for being eager to learn. Thank you for valuing knowledge and respecting intelligence. Thank you for making me feel like coming home. They fell asleep as they had for 50 years, wrapped in each other's arms, two hearts beating in rhythm, two minds that had found their perfect match. The prairie wind whispered around the house, carrying the scent of grass and earth and home. Years continued to pass, gentle and full. Ethan and Zelda remained active and engaged, though age inevitably slowed them. They still read together every evening, discussing ideas and sharing thoughts. They still sat on their porch, watching the sunset and talking about everything and nothing. Their love, tested by time and strengthened by shared experience, remained as vibrant as ever. When Ethan was 83, he fell ill. It was nothing dramatic, just a slow winding down, his body finally giving out after 8 decades of hard work and full living. Zelda nursed him tenderly, reading to him when he was too tired to read himself, holding his hand through the long nights. "No regrets," he told her one evening, his voice weak but his eyes still bright. "I have lived a full, happy life. I learned to read. I built a successful ranch. I raised wonderful children. But most of all, I loved you and was loved by you. That is everything, Zelda. That is the whole world." "You are my whole world," Zelda whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You have been since that day at the depot." "Teach me one more thing," Ethan said, echoing his words from that first evening. "What would you like to know? Teach me how to let go. Teach me that it is okay to rest now." Zelda's heart broke, but she understood. "You have worked hard enough, my love. You have built a legacy that will last for generations. Our children are thriving, our grandchildren are wonderful. The ranch is secure, the school flourishes. Everything we dreamed of has come to pass. It is okay to be tired. It is okay to rest. Will you be all right?" Ethan asked, his hand gripping hers with surprising strength. "I will miss you every moment of every day," Zelda said honestly. "But I will be all right because you loved me so well that I am filled with that love. It will sustain me until I can join you again." Ethan died peacefully 3 days later, surrounded by his family, Zelda's hand in his until the very end. The funeral was attended by hundreds, ranchers and townspeople, former students and business associates, all coming to pay their respects to a man who had lived with integrity and kindness. Zelda grieved deeply, but not desperately. She had been blessed with 55 years of extraordinary marriage, and that was more than many people ever received. She continued to live on the ranch, now run by Daniel and his family. She continued to read and learn, to teach when she had the energy. She took comfort in her children and grandchildren, in the legacy she and Ethan had built together. She lived for 5 more years, remaining sharp and engaged until the very end. On a warm June evening, sitting on the porch where she had spent so many hours with Ethan, Zelda peacefully closed her eyes and did not wake again. She was 81 years old, and she died as she had lived, surrounded by love and books and the vast prairie sky. At her funeral, Rose stood to speak about her mother. "She was rejected for being too educated," Rose said, her voice carrying clearly. "Someone decided that her intelligence made her unsuitable, that her knowledge was a flaw rather than an asset. But my father saw differently. He asked her to teach him everything she knew, and in doing so, he gave her the greatest gift, a place where her intelligence was celebrated, where her education was valued, where she could be fully herself. Together, they built a life of partnership and respect, of mutual growth and deep love. They taught us that intelligence comes in many forms, that education is a lifelong pursuit, and that true love means honoring each other's strengths. My mother's legacy is not just in the school she founded or the students she taught. It is in the example she set of living boldly and authentically, of never diminishing herself to make others comfortable, of finding and nurturing a love that celebrated rather than constrained. She was too educated for one man and perfect for another. And in being perfect for my father, she created something beautiful that will ripple through generations." Daniel added his own tribute, speaking of his father's transformation through education and his mother's unwavering support. The grandchildren shared memories of lessons learned and wisdom imparted. The service was a celebration of 2 remarkable lives, intertwined and complete. Zelda was buried beside Ethan, their headstones simple but eloquent. Ethan Whitmore, 1854–1937. He never stopped learning. Zelda Lancaster Whitmore, 1861–1942. She never stopped teaching. The ranch continued to prosper under Daniel's management, and Rose's mathematical work influenced the field for decades. The school Zelda founded grew into a respected institution, providing quality education to rural children who might otherwise have had limited opportunities. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren carried forward the values of intellectual curiosity and practical wisdom, respect and partnership that Ethan and Zelda had embodied. And sometimes, on warm evenings when the prairie wind whispered through the grass and the sky turned gold with sunset, people swore they could see two figures on the porch of the old ranch house. An elderly couple, sitting close together, reading and talking and simply being present with each other. A mail-order bride who had been returned for being too educated, and a cowboy who had said, "Teach me everything you know," still together in spirit as they had been in life. Their love story woven into the very fabric of the land they had called home. Their story became a legend in Oklahoma, passed down through generations as an example of what was possible when people saw past surface limitations to recognize true worth. It was a story of second chances and unexpected love, of the power of education and the importance of respect. It was a story that reminded people that being too much for one person simply meant you had not yet found the right person, the one who would celebrate rather than diminish all that you were. And at its heart, it was a love story. Simple and profound, built on mutual admiration and genuine partnership, enduring through decades of work and joy, challenge and triumph. It was the story of two people who found each other when they both needed it most, who taught each other immeasurable lessons, and who built a life together that honored both of their truths. In the end, that was the greatest lesson of all, that true love does not ask you to be less than you are. It invites you to be more, to grow and learn and expand. It celebrates your strengths and supports you through weaknesses. It is a partnership of equals, each bringing different gifts to create something greater than either could achieve alone. Zelda Lancaster had been too educated for Frederick Carlyle, but for Ethan Whitmore, she was exactly right. And in that perfect matching, in that recognition and respect and deep abiding love, they had created something that would last far beyond their own lifetimes. A legacy of learning and partnership, of courage and compassion, of two hearts that beat as one from that first moment at the depot until their final breaths and beyond. The prairie remembered them. The school honored them. The family they created carried their values forward. And their story continued to inspire anyone who heard it, a reminder that being rejected by the wrong person often meant you were being redirected toward the right one, and that the greatest love stories are built not on compromise, but on celebration of all that two people can be together.